Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Supremacy with me, of course, Steelfur, aka Finbar, London-based flesh and blood and other card game player. Steelfur Supremacy is my recently, well, it's a couple of weeks old now, playlist dedicated to more competitive content versus my usual Steelfur Speaks, casual content, and just game design chat focused discussions. The topic on the table for today is a short discussion on how to pick a deck for a Nationals tournament. So the last episode we did was about tier lists. There's been a lot of feedback to the tier list. I know that not everyone agrees with where certain heroes have been placed. That is normal and expected. I've said before, I like to do tier lists based on data. We are in this period in between tournaments where the data really doesn't exist, and therefore these things are by their nature speculative. I may be wrong on some calls, I may be right on some calls. That's perfectly fine. People have asked what's been my process for evaluating decks. I haven't obviously had the time, or I haven't seen the optimal version of every deck list, so I can't necessarily evaluate everything personally. But I have spoken to a lot of people who are like myself, testing different ideas with different people, seeing what works. I'm listening to community feedback. So there's a lot of different sources going into where I did that tier list in terms of rankings and things like that. So it's partly based on gameplay, partly based on deck building, what I've seen before, partly a little bit of instinct guessing and a lot of conversations with people who track the community in the same way I do. So we've got that tier list. You could look at that. You could look at the top tier list. You could think maybe I should play one of these decks, right? But you're also sitting there thinking, how do I pick a deck for Nationals, right? Now, maybe you're one of these lucky people who has a main hero, and you're just going to play that hero regardless, right? So you're a Bravo player. You've got your new shield. You've got your new Tear Asunders, your Thumps, and whatever. You're going to play Bravo. You're perfectly happy with that choice, and you're just going to keep on playing that hero until the end of days. And if you are one of those people, congratulations, this is not the video for you. This is the video for all of those people who are just looking at their collection, and they can build decks for 2 or 3 heroes, and they're just like, what do I even... The meta's changed. I haven't got the time to test. How do I even go about picking a deck to play? Yikes. And I just want to take a second just to acknowledge that, you're not alone in that. Everyone has that moment of, what the hell am I playing? If you talk to, and I have talked to a lot of good players at the moment who are in this in-between where there's been a big meta shift, lots of them are saying, I don't know what I'm playing yet, I haven't decided. And the tournament is 3 weeks away, so you would expect a lot of those people to have made up their mind. And be getting in lots of reps, but really what a lot of people are doing is just practicing with 3 or 4 different decks, trying to find that one thing that suits them or is a good answer to whatever they think is going to be in the meta. They're trying to guess what's going to come up so they can plan against it, right? And that's why you hear a lot of discussion focuses around, well, if I think there's going to be a lot of Prism, then I'm going to play this. Or if I think there's going to be a lot of Bravo, then I'm going to play this. Because a lot of people just haven't decided yet. And it's okay to not know. But of course, as I said before, when we were doing all the Katsu deck techs and things like that, if you are planning on taking a deck to a high level event, you do need to start getting practice and reps in a good 2 or 3 weeks before that tournament comes around. So, we are in the position whereby, depending on when your road to Nationals is, you do need to start thinking about locking in a hero for that tournament, right? And that's just the reality of it. Because if you don't lock in and start customizing and tweaking a hero, then you're going to end up probably, unless you play a lot, you practice a lot of different heroes, and you're a very flexible and strong player, you're going to end up in a situation where you simply don't have the time to practice or get the reps in with the hero that you need. So you do need to make that decision. So how do we do it, right? There are a few different ways to pick decks. I mean, ultimately, whilst there are power levels of heroes, if you look at the tier list we did, any hero that's in like the tier 1.5 or upper tier 2 category, if you have played them well and if you played them at a high level, could potentially win a tournament if you are willing to be the best player of that hero in the room, right? And that's important. So I don't want people to feel put off if you have been playing Levia for months and you are the best Levia player in the country, you have a decent chance of winning a national tournament, right? Because she's, a tier 2, tier 1.5 deck. She has good matchups into Prism. She has good matchups into a lot of people. And it is perfectly acceptable. I think this is very important. It is perfectly acceptable to take your favorite deck to a nationals tournament and expect to do well, as long as you have practiced it into the other top decks that you're likely to play, and as long as you don't drastically lose to all of them, or, it's a 50-50 and you're just trusting on your skill and your reps to help you win, or, you have you just don't think a lot of that one deck that beats you is going to show up. So, for example, if I'm playing Prism and I think a lot of people are going to show up with Rhinar and Levia, right, and kick my ass, then I have to ask, well, okay, how many people do I think are going to show up with those decks? And if I think the answer isn't that many, then it's safe to play Prism. Otherwise, it might be worth a change. But equally, if I show up and play Prism, I may not even face those people. So that's the other thing to consider, right? So every time we talk about, I lose to this deck or I lose to that deck, it's kind of important to understand your goals for the tournament, right? Because this helps you pick your deck. It's one of the other things, right? So if your goal is to win the tournament, okay, then you're going to need a tier 1 deck, obviously. You're going to need a tier 1 deck that has a good matchup against the people that you are likely to encounter in the top cut of the tournament. So, and this is an important part of deck choosing that I think we should probably stop and discuss for a while, because we've talked about playing your favorites, which is one of the ways to choose your deck for a tournament like this, is just to look at your favorites and pick the hero that you like the playstyle of most, you have the cards for, you like the art style of, and you have lots of reps with. That is one consistent way to choose a deck that you are going to have fun playing, that you are going to win well with because you've got a lot of practice with. Another way, of course, is to choose a deck that is going to do well to match the goals that you have in the tournament, okay? You may have the goal going into nationals of saying, look, I need to win this tournament. I'm very, very confident that I can get a good enough score in Swiss to get into the top cut with the deck that I choose. I need to make sure that I am winning that top cut, right? Now, the pros of this strategy is that when you get to the top cut, if you get to the top cut, you will know roughly the sort of people you're going to be up against, right? Country metas aren't actually that fluid. You have certain good players like Sharif in the UK who will consistently perform at a high level, and you can expect to see in the top cut of tournaments. No pressure, Sharif, but I expect you to do well at nationals. And in the face of that, you can sort of plan for the top cut that you're going to play in, right? So you can make sure you've got your sideboard in for, say, Dorinthia and Prism and, previously Chain, right? So, for example, the best way to illustrate this is the Chain matchup, right? Now, you could tech your deck versus Chain quite heavily in the last meta because he was also a decent proportion of the field. But one of the things you definitely had to do if you wanted to win a top cut was tech your deck versus Chain, because half of the top cut was going to be Chain. And we don't have such a significant outlier, but the fact remains that if you haven't taken into account the matchup that you're going to have in the top cut of a tournament, then you're not likely to do very well once you make the top cut, right? And that is an important consideration in terms of what deck you're going to choose and what deck you're going to play, because that is a factor of how well you want to do in the tournament, right? Now, if you're less confident in your Swiss performance that you are in the top cut, and you say to yourself, okay, if I get to the top cut, it is whatever it is. We'll see what happens. But I don't know that I'm going to make the top cut. I really, really want to work very, very hard on making the top cut and getting into Swiss, right? So different questions arise when you're talking about your Swiss performance versus a top cut performance, right? Again, to come back to Chain. If you go into a tournament where the tournament is, say, 25% Chain, but then half of the top cut is Chain, you need to tech, if you're building for the top cut, to build into a Chain-heavy environment and make sure you can win your Chain games. But at the same tournament, If only 25% of the field is chain, 75% of the field is not chain. And to do well in Swiss, you need to tech your deck against not chain, but in fact the deck that is the most popular in your region or area. So, for example, London, where I live, saw a lot of people getting into the game in Monarch. And that means a lot of those people have gravitated towards the Monarch heroes like Chain, Bolton, and Prism. Prism especially has caught a lot of attention, which means when you went to the Road to Nationals in London, you had a large representation of Prism players. And that meant that actually one of the main considerations you had when you were building your deck and choosing what hero to play was how to handle the Prism matchup, because otherwise you would lose to more Prisms in the Swiss, and you would therefore struggle. Okay? So it is correct to think, what is the best deck that I can play against the field rather than the cut? And those are kind of two distinct thoughts. Now, it is important to stop and say that, like, I'm presenting these as two siloed thoughts. You know, if you're really just trying to do as well as you can throughout the entire tournament, you do need to like combine these two ways of thinking into what is the deck that I need to get me through the Swiss? What's the sideboard I need to get me through all those Prisms I'm going to run into? And B, what is the sideboard I need to win the top cut? You need to have both, right? To truly excel and win a national tournament, you obviously need to have a sideboard that takes into account both and makes the right meta calls for the entire tournament, not just the Swiss or the top cut. But it is kind of important to think about those two things as separate pillars in terms of what deck am I taking. So am I taking a deck that is going to stomp all those Prisms in the field, but then lose out to the Bravos in the top cut? Am I taking a deck that's going to maybe lose to one or two Prisms in the Swiss, but then is going to beat the Bravos in the top cut? And that's kind of a worthy evaluation, right? Now, you notice I'm not giving you answers here. That's because obviously we have the tier list video where we talk about things like that. And there is still a lot of things up in the air in terms of testing which decks are winning what, where the good matchups are, that we're going to get into hopefully closer to Nationals when that sort of information becomes more apparent to us. But at least it is for your own testing. You can kind of record, like, okay, this game is losing to Bravo. How many Bravos do I see in my local armories? How many Bravos have I seen on the large online events in my country? How popular was Bravo before the Road to National season? How many people really liked Bravo then? Do I think those people are still playing Bravo? There's lots of questions you could ask to give yourself an idea of what the Swiss rounds are going to be. And then it comes down to power levels, as well as how many people showed up playing a certain hero, as to what heroes you'll see in the top cut. Because obviously, a really popular hero that is average to mid-tier is going to have representation in the top cut, even if they're not the strongest hero, because numbers will get them through. However, you know, a very, very good hero with low performance can also put those numbers into the top cut. So there's lots of different things going on there, but just one of those pillars you can consider alongside which hero do you like is also which hero is strong in the Swiss, which hero is strong in the top cut, right? Outside of those two metrics, you have roughly like two other areas that it's good to consider and talk about when picking a deck for a big tournament. You have, on the one hand, you have your tier lists and your rock, paper, scissors, lizard spock, whatever you want to do, of which heroes are better, right? I mean, that's as simple. Is there a tier 0 hero that's got a better matchup? What heroes have consistently better matchups into everyone else you have to play? One of the reasons that Chain got knocked down such a peg is that he had a positive win rate into a lot of the other heroes in the game. And that meant that even though but also a positive matchup if you built him right into himself. So if you came up with a certain aggro build into Chain, which didn't have that aggro build, then you would win more. So the fact is that Chain had that flexibility, which meant that was why he became to dominate the meta in such a heavy way. We don't have that situation now, I believe. From my tier list, you can see that I definitely don't think we don't have a tier 0 hero that comes out that far on top. And because of that, there is more of this rock, paper, scissors meta thing going on, where, certain heroes like, Prism will beat Bravo. People still argue that, but Prism has consistently been beating Bravo in the past. Whether that's changed recently, that's something open for discussion. Katsu will beat Prism. Dorinthia will hurt Katsu, but it's a closer matchup. There's this kind of like wheel of which decks beat each other decks, which is a good healthy meta because then you can kind of figure out what to play, and if you get it right, you will be rewarded for guessing correctly. But, you do kind of have to think, where are you in that rock, paper, scissors, right? If everyone has moved to Bravo, are you at the stage where you just need to play Prism and then smash the Bravos, right? Is that where we are in the rotation? Because there's a timing thing that influences what decks you'll play in a specific tournament. Now, it's less true for an early meta tournament, right? So this is kind of important to just stop and pay attention to for a second. So, for a late meta tournament, where you have 5 or 6 tournaments before it, so late road to nationals, or after a few national tournaments have happened, this rotational wheel to an extent will have started, where essentially a lot of players at the previous event will have played Dash, for example, and done very well with her, and that means that at the next event a lot of people will start playing the counter to Dash, expecting people to come with the deck that was winning a lot of the previous tournament. So you have this kind of rotational wheel. I'm doing wheels with my hands, rather ineffectually, but you have this rotational wheel of cogs turning where heroes will switch in and out, right? So timing which hero to play on that rotational wheel is quite important. And that kind of gives you an idea of where you are on that whole rock, paper, scissors dynamic in terms of picking the right hero for your specific meta. Of course, the challenge there is you have to pick it like 3 weeks in advance so you can get enough practice. And also you have to correctly guess. And also it may vary depending on your location and what heroes are popular. Because one thing that people do drastically underestimate in Flesh and Blood, which I've talked about before, is that this is a tribal game. Very much so. There are people who bandwagon from hero to hero. But not everyone does. Not everyone can afford to because of the legendary problem. So this is very much a tribal hero, much like you have tribal, people who just play elves or squirrels or whatever in Magic. There are people who will just play Prism, who will just play the hero. They really like the art style. They like the play style. They think, I'd rather win with this hero than win with someone else. I'd rather win with this hero that I put a lot of practice into rather than switch to someone else. Or I'd rather win with this hero finally than switch to someone else, right? There's lots of different reasons driving it, but Flesh and Blood is, in my opinion, even at the national level, still a very tribal game and a factional game, which means you kind of don't just look at that, what's everyone been playing that's winning. You also kind of have to look at what is everyone going to play around me. So that's kind of like another factor, is that timing of the rock, paper, scissors, of the meta shift, and understanding what your local meta is going to be like so you can pick the right deck at the right time. So it's kind of 3 factors so far. Just a bit of a recap. We've talked about your favorite deck being an okay choice, as long as it's reasonably positioned in the meta as a 1.5 or high tier 2 deck. If you have the reps, go for it. We've talked about, understanding the best deck in the meta and try maybe to play that. We've talked about that like rotational meta idea of what's stronger. I guess the last point really to cover off, because I didn't want this video to be too long. I kind of wanted it to be a bit of a primer of what to do and what not to do, and how to sort of get your head around this idea so that people feel a bit more confident choosing their deck. And I guess the final point really is just to trust your instincts. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, I switched decks at the last minute because I was really worried and then I lost or won. And those stories aren't really that common. Like, typically the deck that wins is the one that you have worked on, you've played a lot, you've got the reps with, and, you're ready to win with. So those last minute shifts or those guts or those worries, like, they're best not to do. You need to trust your initial instinct when you've picked a deck and just follow through with that into the tournament and respect the practice that you've already done. Now, that's not to say there aren't times when changing late is the right choice because someone discovers something that just completely blows your deck out of the water, or the meta shifts and you're confident on a second deck so you can switch. But a lot of the time, the deck you choose isn't as important as the practice you have with the deck, right? And this is something you can't say with every game, because a lot of the time you do have a tier 0 or a certain number of tier 1 decks that everyone has to play. A lot of Magic metas get that way, where there's these tier 1 decks that everyone has to play one of, or you're just going to lose because they're better than everyone else. But if you look at the tier list, and I know I've referred to that video a lot, but really there's no other way to talk about it. It's just that, in my opinion, this game is incredibly balanced, where lots of heroes have a chance to win, and lots of heroes are in a very strong position to actually put forward a good showing at the national tournament. So when it comes down to it, I think it's fair to say that you can trust your instincts to play that hero that you are good with, and not worry too much about shifting around. Like, if you're sitting there and you're like, I think there's something to this Briar deck, I really do, play with it. Play as many games as you can, refine it, tweak it, and then just go to Nationals with it. Ultimately, half of Nationals is draft anyway. You can get wins in draft. You need to get like 2 wins in draft and 4 wins in constructed to make day 2. You know, it's not actually that stressful, right? Well, it's stressful, obviously. My point is that, like, because it's a split format event, your constructed performance isn't the be-all and end-all of everything, though you do still have to do well. But you could lose a game or 2 and do very well in the draft and still get into the cut. And then, of course, the cut is a draft, so you have lots of different options there as well. So, you know, don't be afraid to take that deck that you know is good enough, right? Because a lot of the time, and I think this is a good point to end on, because I don't want this video going too long, it's supposed to be a nice quick fire primer, give you some food for thought to help drive your own confidence in choosing a deck that you're going to be happy to play, right? So that's why I'm not giving you the answers. I'm not being like, everyone should play X. I'm trying to give you a bit of mental energy from myself to you as to how to commit to and choose a deck now, because we're, in the UK, we're 3 weeks out from Nationals. You need to be going with something, you need to be picking something soon, and you need to be happy with your choice, and you need to feel confident and not be wish-washy and switching around and not getting practice and not tweaking and refining, and not gauntleting. Obviously, gauntleting is super important. So for those of you who aren't aware, it's just where you pick the decks you're going to think you're going to play against, the best decks in the format, and you just test your deck into it, and you tweak your deck so that it can win those games, and you're not just getting blown out of the water. So gauntleting is incredibly important. So, yeah, I think we're going to leave it there. I'm really happy with this kind of sort of discussion with everyone. I hope that you'll find this useful. I certainly find it useful to talk about it to everyone, because I still have not picked a deck for Nationals. Hopefully I will have soon. And I guess just to wrap up and talk about what my plans are for the National season itself, I am probably going to be easing back on content just slightly in the lead up to the UK Nationals, which is of course on Halloween. We are the first Nationals. I would love to come back to you guys and say, oh, I made top 8, or I did, I'd love to do very well at it. And for that reason, I might be just refocusing some of my time away from, say, 3 or 4 videos a week, maybe down to 1 or 2 videos a week, when it makes sense to do. Also, LSS does seem to be going into a bit of a quiet period, and I kind of just like to use this opportunity to just take a small bit of a break. Not completely, but 1 or 2 videos a week will be more of a break. That'll be fine. And then, of course, once the UK Nationals is over, we have no major competition in Europe until the calling in December. So my plan, once UK Nationals is over, is basically just to take the gloves off in the way that maybe other content creators won't be able to, because their Nationals will still be coming up. So once UK Nationals is over, I mean, I'll be doing my deck tech. I'll do deck techs with whoever else will give me a deck. I'll review the metas. I'll talk about competition. I'll basically spill every secret that I can. The only reason I'm not really doing it now, it's not, to a certain extent, part of me is like, the less I tell people about what I'm doing, is, the more I'm going to win. And I'm not really fond of that attitude. The main reason is because obviously I'm testing with other people, and I kind of want to respect their right, because they've asked me, listen, can you not spread too much information about what we're doing? So I'm kind of respecting that. because that's important. And also, there's just an element of I don't actually know that I have the right answers for people yet. I have theories, I have discussions, I'm talking to a lot of people about what I think is going to be the case. And obviously, I'm talking to you guys through the meta videos and this sort of video about what I think is going to be the case. But I don't really want to come out with that video that says, look, this is the definitive Briar, this is the definitive Bravo, and have someone take that list to Nationals and then do badly with it because I was wrong or I called the meta wrong, and then they're at UK Nationals and I'm playing against them, or they've been knocked out of the tournament because I gave them bad advice. And you know, I kind of want to avoid that situation. When I started doing this channel, I said I wanted to do videos where I had good talking points and where I had data. And one of the things we really don't have right now, because we haven't had any Nationals, is data on what is doing very well. So once Nationals hits, and I hope people understand that decision and you're all here with me on this journey, I am almost at 700 subscribers. So thank you everyone who is coming along to watch my content and, you know, engaging with me. It's amazing. It's an amazing ride. And I think, you know, when we hit 1,000, I will probably give away something from this cold foil pile here. Let's not lie, it's all commons, mostly commons. I'll probably give something like that away to my subscribers once I think once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I can actually see my subscriber list. I don't know if I can see it now. I think it's just hidden from me until it gets to a certain point. But we will do some kind of raffle when we hit 1,000, just to celebrate, because that will be a massive milestone. But yeah, so everyone's here. We're having fun, and obviously, you know, even if there is a week or two where content is a bit less because I'm practicing harder and trying to get myself into the best competitive position I can for Nationals, the second that UK Nationals is over at Halloween, expect a hotel room video post tournament, expect a deep dive video on the deck I chose to play and why, and what other people were playing and why. All of that sort of content is going to come. So if you are from outside the UK, and sorry, my UK listeners, I know you want that support as well, but I don't have the perfect answer for you yet, so I don't want to give it. But if you are from outside the UK, obviously once our Nationals is over, I'm going to be coming out with all that sort of content, and hopefully I will have found some good answers for you guys before your own national tournament that will help you get prepared in the best way. I do truly think the Nationals, more than the callings, is where this game truly shines, because country energy is just so important for a game like this, and getting people out and meeting from all over the country into one place and just building that energy together and showing you that, you know, you're not alone when you meet up with 10 people in your local game shop. You're not by yourself. You're not just a small group of people playing a game that doesn't exist, and you can't really appreciate that until you go to a big event where there's 100, 200 people playing Flesh and Blood. And it is one thing to see it on the Vegas stage and think, okay, maybe a lot of people play this game, and completely different to be immersed in it yourself for a whole weekend with 100 other people all loving the game and having a great time. So, you know, Nationals is going to be huge for this game. I'm super excited. Expect to see another video from me next week. And of course, I also have the creators of Aria sealed tournament gameplay. I'm just waiting on a video file from my first round opponent so I can put the game up with a bit of commentary. Once I have that, that's going to go live. I was lucky enough to, spoilers, the first game. So yeah, that'll be great too. As always, thank you all for listening. If you've made it this far and you aren't subscribed, you definitely like my content, so go subscribe, because I think your ears have told you that you have a preference for this lovely British voice over those nasty American streamers. And yeah, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.